This ship is headed to Hispaniola. An island spanning over 29,000 square miles. The original inhabitants of this land, the Tainos, called it Haiti, which translates to land of high mountains. But these Spanish sailors don't know that yet.
When we talk about the Taino, few people even know what we're talking about. Everyone knows the Aztec, everyone knows the Inca, everyone knows the Maya. You mention Taino and they go, who are these people? These are the people that greeted Columbus. When Columbus arrived in the New World, there were several million Taino already here, living in the Greater Antilles.
Caves have a very special role in Taino culture. They are sort of the way that this world is physically connected to the underworld where the spirits of the dead dwell. The Tainos believed humans were created in two caves. The Taino people came from one cave, and all the non-Taino people came from another.
Caves in particular had a special significance for the Taino because they were considered to be gateways to the physical world and the spiritual world.
When I look at Padre Nuestro, what I look at is its implications for the actual people in the Caribbean, which is one of the last places in the world that was inhabited. So 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, we know people came into the Caribbean. The question is, where did they come from? Probably the first wave coming into the Greater Antilles came from the mainland, probably Yucatan, by boat. Came across, inhabited Cuba, inhabited Dominican Republic, and we have evidence of that.
When it comes to the Tainos, we have to understand propaganda. You can't have a so-called savage race actually do better than colonial conquest. So they will downplay the great achievements many native populations made. The Tainos had a written language, they had steel forgery, and they weren't in no way, shape, or form primitive, as some people might think.
They did use certain metals ceremonially. So for example, soft metals like silver and gold. They also had a certain alloy that they called guanine, which was a mixture, I believe, of gold, silver, and copper.
De la Casa's journal stated that metal casting, and he said, and I quote, "Black people who have the tops of their spears made of the metal they call guanine."
As far as their spirituality, it was very different from the Spaniards who would come later. Lived by a system that we would refer to today as animism, which is the belief that there is a creator. Underneath the creative forces, other lesser deities, for want of a better term. Their spiritual outlook on life, or the existence of the cosmos, was in stark contrast to the European or Judeo-Christian outlook on spirituality. We had to live in balance with all of the elements of nature, right? Now you contrast that with the Judeo-Christian ideology that man is separate from nature, and that nature has been given to mankind for us to dominate. It's a very different outlook on life.
Columbus was of the idea that there was a lot of gold in that area. What he wanted to do was to have this fort over there so that they could start the trade with these people.
Everyone knew he was coming back. A little over a year later, he comes on the second voyage. He arrives at Navidad. And what's he find? Smoldering timbers. Everyone's dead.
There was a doctor with the group who said they looked like they'd been dead about 2 weeks.
Columbus was thinking about trade, but the Spaniards were thinking about colonization. They actually started to demand some things from the indigenous people, and the indigenous people just did not accept them.
When it comes to white supremacy, control is everything. The Spanish had the mindset that non-white people are lower than them. So forced labor was implemented.
They brought a priest, they brought some women, they brought animals, they brought everything they need for a full-fledged colonization.
The sort of backbone of the early Spanish colonial economy was the right to make demands on the labor of the Tainos.
If a Taino did not want to accept Christianity, that person could be enslaved.
One of the major sources of the writings of Father Las Casas.
He had seen actually in Cuba rivers of blood, of all the indigenous people that were killed and massacred in the hands of the Spaniards.
When Columbus came, this ushered in a destruction of their whole civilization, their whole way of life. It was completely disrupted. A harbinger of doom, because when you read his writings, you can see right away his mentality was extremely problematic. So I'm just going to read you one account of this is being written a few months after his arrival. I assure your highnesses that I believe that in all the world there is no better people nor better country. They love their neighbors as themselves, and they have the sweetest talk in the world, and are gentle and always laughing. They bear no arms and are all naked, and of no skill in arms, and so very cowardly that 1,000 would not stand against 3. They are fit to be ordered about and made to work, to sow and do everything else that may be needed. Right there you can see his mindset is problematic, because he's already thinking in terms of subjugation and conquest.
They overworked the Tainos in the gold mines and the Spanish plantations. They took them away from their villages and their families at crucial points of the agricultural year.
From then on, we're going to see that there's going to be a major clashes, actually, in which many Spaniards actually died at the hands of the Taino.
It was complete chaos. It really was a free-for-all.
The trigger, at least as the story has come down to us, was when a Spaniard cut off a Taino's ear.
There's one account of one of the Spaniards who had cut off the ear of one of the Tainos because they didn't bring to him enough gold.
Las Casas initially came to the New World and was swinging a sword like everyone else, going against the Taino as ordered. But he saw the visions that these people were being annihilated, and so really their rights, the one person that stood up was Las Casas.
All the indigenous people that were killed and massacred in the hands of the Spaniards. They're going to be talking about the exploitation of the indigenous people, and that is going to create a whole debate in Spain about whether or not the indigenous people have a soul, if these are actually human beings, people who can actually learn to be Christians.
His writings, which are probably our single most valuable written source on Taino culture, are very sympathetic to the cause of the Tainos.
Start of the 16th century, 1510, thereabouts. The resistance, the Taino resistance took place because of the atrocities that were being committed.
From then on, we're going to see that there's going to be a major clashes, actually, in which many Spaniards actually died at the hands of the Tainos.
Taino weapons, they did have bows and arrows, but the weapon that the Spanish say they feared the most, and which the most effective Taino weapon, was a long club known as a macana. It was said to have been capable of crushing a man's skull even if he were wearing a steel helmet.
We had clubs, we had stones, yes, we had metal, we had knives, but they had weapons that we did not have. They had cannons that was easy to subjugate us, to subject us to their will. We got nothing out of them except death and disease. You know, we didn't have syphilis in the Caribbean until Columbus came to the Caribbean. Okay, that was a European disease. As atrocities continue to occur by the Spaniards, where they hunted where they would tear down complete yucayecas, villages of people.
We have accounts of people who found their world so changed, so disintegrating, so unrecognizable that they felt they couldn't go on living in it. And so there are accounts of at least some Tainos killing their children and then committing suicide, rather than trying to face a world in which they could no longer cope.
The annihilation of the culture of the Taino and right in through the Americas is well documented. As small amounts of Spanish made huge influence because of their arms and their weapons and their tactics. They were there to conquer. They were there to make a conquest. Maybe there's 1 million. Maybe there was 500,000. The point is there was a large number of indigenous population of the Taino that were decimated, assimilated, or just disappeared within the first 10 to 20 years of contact with the New World.
The Tainos had been pacified, subdued, and they had been placed under the system called the encomiendas, which meant that Spanish settlers were given tracts of land, and they were given ownership of the local population who lived on that land for the sake of extracting labor for them. It is a form of slavery. De las Casas, his account is probably the first and the most best known account of the atrocities that the Tainos faced.
There's a myth that Columbus was jailed after the Spanish found out what he did to the native population, which is a huge mischaracterization of the truth.
And once the crown finds out what was going on there, they send an inspector to Hispaniola, and Columbus and his brothers are arrested and taken back to Spain.
Spain didn't care what happened to the lives of the Tainos, nor the treatment they endured. Columbus was jailed because of mismanagement of wealth and accused of hoarding gold outside of the eyes of Spain.
So it's a combination of his ineptitude in running the colony and the level of brutality against the native population.
Because of that, after 4 months of his incarceration, Spain let him out and gave him more money to sail for the 4th time.
Finances to have a 4th and final expedition. They were instructed to treat the natives peacefully. What's written on paper and what happens in real life are two completely different things. Part of what he was entrusted to do when he went there was to convert them to Catholicism. Now, if you're busy cutting off people's noses and forcing them to work in mines, what time do you have for religious instruction?
Those that didn't die from disease or from working the mines or being forced into slave labor were assimilated into the African blacks that were being brought in starting in 1511. And so these cultures were becoming intermixed. So I don't think the Taino are gone. I think they're still here today. Certainly the linguistics are here. We talk about hurricane, Taino, canoe, Taino, manatee, Taino, the word barbecue, Taino.
There are people who identify themselves as Taino. The largest and most active groups are in Puerto Rico.
The 2010 census that we just had, there was a 48% increase in people identifying as Taino on the island. Borinquen. That translates to about 19,000 people.
Been a very important study that was done now a few years ago under National Science Foundation, University of Puerto Rico, looking at genetics and looking at the traits of Taino that are in the genome. And certainly we see that. That's not to be unexpected. First they went to remote village areas, then they went just to the general population. And what they found was as many as 60% of the population in Puerto Rico is carrying the genome of the Taino.
It is my job to go to Cleveland, where there are 44,000 Puerto Ricans. If we go by the statistics, 60% of them are going to have Taino heritage, Taino blood in them, Taino DNA.
They don't live the way Tainos did 500 years ago, but we don't live the way our ancestors did 500 years ago. But they do try to preserve some Taino traditional knowledge, Taino dances and music, Taino beliefs, and so on.
Now we have a resurgence. The resurgence is that we accept who we are as indigenous people. It makes no sense for a nation such as ours to not be aware and not to know what has been done generations past. It isn't meant to be that we are to feel guilty about it, but not to let it happen again.
The Taino people were the inhabitants of Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Florida. We now know the history of the Taino people and the atrocities they experienced at the hands of the Spanish. This story doesn't end here. Stay tuned for part 2, coming soon.